thank everyone for coming. We have a terrific show, great presenters tonight. I always like to thank our sponsors who help us out, which is Epson Photo Shelter, Pro Photo Daily, Archive Magazine, and American Photography. Um, Also, I invite everyone to subscribe to us on YouTube at Projections NYC. If you could do that, that would be great. Um, and tonight we have Mark Edward Harris, my dear friend Abby Greenawalt, and we're going to start with Stefan Chow, who is coming from us from Beijing. So we're thrilled about that. So we'll turn the screen over to Stefan, and off we go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Let me just share my screen. How are we doing?
Perfect.
Okay. Just hold on. Hello, everyone. So I'm Stefen. I'm actually born in Malaysia, raised in Singapore. And I grew up always dreaming, wanting to be a photographer for National Geographic. That was my childhood dream ever since. I climbed my first mountain when I was 15 and never quite stopped since. So I was very fortunate. My first break into my photography portfolio is actually documenting my teammates climbing in the Himalayan mountains. And at the age of 25 in 2005, I summited Everest. And that was really my first portfolio, and that's how I started. So let me begin.
So Stefan, did
Yes.
were you a climber before you were a photographer, or one happened with both of them coming together?
Yeah, I started as a trekker. I started as climbing smaller mountains in Malaysia, smaller but no less dense. Malaysia actually has some of the densest forests, jungles in the world. I didn't know then, but then now that you look back, it's very humid. It's almost 100% humidity, rains every day. It's hard. So when we got into the Himalayas, actually the weather seems a lot better because it's a lot drier. The weather looks a lot better. And so when I went in as an undergraduate in my university, I was still training as a outdoors person. And so it came that the university was trying to commemorate its 100-year founding. So they formed a team to climb Everest. It was considered very momentous for the university because growing up in Singapore, I don't know how many of you have been to Singapore, but Singapore's weather is right at the equator. So it is 90 degrees all year, 90 Fahrenheit all year, 90 to 100. And the highest point in Singapore is 163 meters, which is about 500 feet. So Singapore is not exactly known for high places. In fact, the highest building in Singapore is higher than the highest mountain or hill. So for us to actually venture out into the Himalayas and into Everest is considered quite extreme. So I was an outdoors person first. And once I got into the team had to have different roles. So some were in charge of food, some were in charge of training. I was in charge of photography because I just happened to have the biggest camera. That's it. I had no idea of what photography was about on a professional level, but very quickly I realized that the trips I was taking with my teammates was special because we never knew when we would go back again. So I started taking on the role as a photographer for the team quite seriously, to the point that I started approaching photographers. I started approaching anyone who was willing to mentor, who was willing to give feedback, and actually I remembered that there was once in Singapore a UN photographer came to do an exhibition. His name is John Isaac. I don't know whether you're familiar with him.
No.
And So I just wanted to show my portfolio to him. And when he saw my photos, he immediately grabbed me and said, "These are beautiful. You should really consider um, a career in photography." And so I'm always very grateful for any veteran in the industry to give someone who's young, someone who has inexperience, some confidence, some tips, some idea on how to actually get into the industry itself. So yeah, so that's how it all started. But
Okay.
this is my first portfolio that you're seeing. So this is the base camp of Everest, um, shot on film back in 2005. This is all slide film. This is the base camp. You can see my our main tent just right here, and Everest is just behind where the cursor is. This is the Kombu Ice Fall, and so this is actually the part where it's the most dangerous stretch in the mountain itself. And just now, earlier, I was saying that when I was climbing, most of the expeditions we were part of was relatively smooth. We had some medical mishaps, but basically no fatalities. But a few years later, I actually returned to this spot when for the Wall Street Journal when a piece of ice serac actually fell and 16 Sherpas were killed in that one incident. It was the one single worst accident on Everest in its history. So really reminded how small um, we humans are compared to nature. Just to give you an indication, to get from this point to here is Camp 1, and it takes about 7 hours of meandering through ice seracs, very unstable features, and ice under sun will melt and they will fall and they will collapse. And when they collapse, it's
I
the
was right
ice
on
blocks.
cue, Stefan.
I know, yeah, my notice board just fell. So yeah, and I think for a young man at 25 years old to step on top of the summit of Everest was really truly a magical feeling. And I think more importantly, I felt very humbled that I could actually do this because standing on top of Everest taught me one thing. It's not just luck that gets you on top. It's hard work, it's preparation, and it's also everyone else's good fortune because my Sherpa needed to be in good shape, the weather needed to be good, my teammates needed to be um, logistically prepared, mentally prepared. So it's not just about me. It's everyone coming together and making sure that this works. So I think if that's one lesson is the fact that it's preparation meets luck, and I felt incredibly humble, and I always brought that with me whatever I did after. So what I did after was that I realized that I really wanted to be a photographer. And so I flew to New York in '07, shortly after getting my first freelance job as a news photographer in Singapore. I came to New York because I wanted to learn from the best. And so I started assisting anyone I could get my hands on. I went for openings, I went for night classes, and this is actually done during a class at ICP that was taught by Amy Abbas. Um, and Amy has been one of the most incredible instructors for me because she basically got me to push my comfort level. Up to that point, I wasn't comfortable photographing people. I wasn't comfortable going up to people, um, asking them if I could be with them, if I could document them. And during class, I did mention that having been a new visitor to New York, I said I go to B&H a little bit too much. So, and I noticed that B&H is staffed by mostly Hasidic Jews. And so they say, okay, that's an interesting subject, but you can't get in because they are a very close community. So I started hanging around in the community for about a few weeks without a camera. And once they started getting curious and wondering what I was doing, I said I was learning photography and I was hoping to document their community. And they let me in into the synagogues, into their weddings, into their events, and they were very friendly to me, and that's what I really appreciated because I realized that there's no such thing as a closed community. It's always about trust. It's always about empathy, and it's always about communication. Um, so I came back and I went to New York. I went to Beijing in 2008, just when the Olympics was concluding in Beijing. And I saw Beijing because um, New York actually served as the platform where I thought Beijing could be the place that I wanted to be next. Because while I'm ethnically Chinese, I was brought up in a very different system from the Chinese educational system. But I understood both languages. I understood Mandarin Chinese, and of course, I'm speaking to you in English. English is actually my native tongue. So I felt very comfortable in both places, and I just wanted to see what Beijing was about. And from there, I started doing different work. This is actually short for Geo magazine in Germany, and this is profiling some of the best scientists that was in China then. And this is also my first step into editorial assignment photography. I remember this was a feature of a environmental scientist. I visited him in his office in his university, and I actually had the audacity to look at the surroundings and I said, this is not the right place to photograph you. Um, and can we reschedule? Can we choose another spot? And on the spot, we spoke about different environments that could better serve as an environment for him as an environmental scientist. So he suggested this wind farm that is 6 hours out of Beijing.
So,
And I said,
Stefan, just a
yes.
question. So, like, when do you realize you have the courage to say this is not the place for you? Right? That takes a bit of time, but it takes a certain amount of courage to say we've got to go somewhere else.
In front of him when I first saw him. So
Okay.
I visited him in his office. And he came out and he said, okay, where do you want to shoot this? And I said that I went around the campus. I didn't go into your office until right now. And I just felt that there was nothing that was really inspiring. And
And
he
he
kind of
agreed.
agreed. He
Yeah.
agreed. He kind of felt that, oh, it's that's a fair statement. I think he's been profiled before by different publications. People usually photograph him standing at his desk or in his office, and his lab is nothing sexy to speak about from a visual perspective.
Yeah.
And so I convinced him to go to a wind farm with me. I hired a van, and I said, "What is the most environmental thing you have on you?" And he says, I have this 20-year-old bicycle, which I bought from an uncle in China. And then I said, we'll bring that bicycle along. So this is my first on the string budget um, location shoot. As you can see in the background, it's actually terribly cold. I think it was minus 20 degrees Celsius when we shot this. So he was in his thick jacket, and we came out, we posed him, and the moment we are ready, we took his jacket off, and we took this for maybe half a minute, and we put the jacket on again. Um, I don't know if I have the courage to do that nowadays, but during then I was a little bit younger. I was a little bit more opinionated with my thoughts, but the editors love it, and this is where it started becoming a trend. I started photographing some of the top scientific labs. This is a synchrotron facility in Shanghai. Um, this is a rice genome scientist. Again, I went to the lab and I rearranged all his specimens, and then we placed back everything back into place. I think the whole setup took us a good 5 hours just to do this, but it started allowing me to understand how photography is not just an instant. It was also about planning. It was about communication. It was about pushing um, your subjects. And this turned out to be my biggest issue for the magazine. It became a 16-page article, which was really cool. And that year, it was also rated one of the top articles for the magazine. And before I continue to the next chapter, I also want to talk about second chances, because when I first photographed the first scientist, which was this gentleman over here, I was given a brief. And up to then, I wasn't very familiar with studio lighting. So they sent me on the assignment, and I went to photograph the professor. And this is what I came back with. This was version 1. I immediately got a call from the magazine, and they say, there's a problem here. I said, what's the problem? And then they say, we don't see the moment. We don't see the light. We don't feel the subject. We don't feel like this could be a spread. And I remember I say, I don't know what you mean. And the editor was kind enough to explain very plainly that my photograph sucks. And I think that was such a wake up call for me. I remember, breaking up in cold sweat, realizing I was just not good enough as a photographer. And should I throw in my towel because I wasn't familiar with lighting? And I actually begged for a second chance from the editor. And the editor says, I'll give you a second chance if you get it right, but then you also have to beg the same professor for a second shoot. So second chances, man, not easy. Very, very difficult, and of course a lot of hard learning, but it really allowed me to get to the next stage of being comfortable of the work that I do. So in
It's a great
2000.
story, Stefan. It's really great. It's
Thank
good
you.
to share that. We always
Yeah.
need to hear that.
Yes. And so in 2012, I was given an assignment by the Smithsonian, and they said, hey, we have a very interesting subject. He's an artist based in China, and he's just released from house arrest. His name is Ai Weiwei, and at that time, he was considered one of the most influential contemporary artists of our time. And he just got released from house arrest, and you would be the first photographer to photograph him. And so we went to his studio, and we did a bunch of things. I set him up in the studio. I photographed him, and then we put him on this black backdrop where I started photographing him. And somehow I felt I wasn't getting what I wanted. Ai Weiwei seems a little bit tense. He didn't seem very agreeable. He definitely wasn't smiling for the camera. For someone who just got released from house arrest, that's perfectly understandable. And I was scrambling a bit. I was trying to photograph him. What if he couldn't be photographed again? What if he was sent back to arrest for much longer? So I was trying to capture something that felt timeless. And in the end, the editors chose this one last picture. And this one last picture is, if I zoom out, is this. So anyone who was familiar with Ai Weiwei's work was that he uses a lot of work that goes against the grain of um, Chinese government ideology. Salem, I think you need to mute. Okay. So yeah. Wait.
And did he like the image after the fact?
Uh,
Well, you couldn't
so
tell.
this is what I realized. When I do my portraits, unless it's for a corporate portrait, if
Mm.
it's for an editorial shot, I usually don't I I I I don't really care if the person likes it because I sometimes I put them into situations where I want a really intimate moment. And that intimate moment in Asia, at least on a cultural level, people don't like to show the true self of themselves. And that is actually a balance that you have to strike. And and so a very intimate portrait taken in Asia may seem very, very uncomfortable for the individual who is documented because they felt that everything is exposed. Um, so I realized that I have learned the hard way that I prefer not to ask a subject if they love the photo because um, in Asia, everyone loves putting on a mask. They would rather have a perfect looking, touched up picture of themselves than something that feels a little bit embellished and imperfect and vulnerable.
Personal.
So but this was the photo that I was taking of Ai Weiwei, and this was back in 2012. And just mind you, Ai Weiwei had also had a very big social presence, and so his weapon against the Chinese government then was using his phone as a way to tweet out messages. So in some ways, the pen is mightier than the sword, and the smartphone has become mightier than the pen. And so eventually, this photo won a second prize at the World Press Photos Award, which is again the highest award in photojournalism. And this was such an honor for me. And I emailed back Ai Weiwei. I said, "Hey, you know, I won the prize, and it appears that you were taking a picture of me. Were you doing that?" And he's like, "Yes, I am. This is the picture."
Ah,
So
there you go.
he sent back the picture to me, and so this is exactly the moment where I photographed him. Um, my face is not seen, which is lovely. I love that because this really
Perfect.
shows what I was trying to do and to make a connection with my subject. And so for the WordPress photo, it's a great organization.
Yeah.
They say congratulations, you're invited to the party, but because you're second place, we cannot pay for your flights and your board. So I said, no problem, I'll come.
There
So
you go.
I flew to Amsterdam for the awards. And just when you think that you have reached the pinnacle of your career, you meet other winners. You meet other winners who people who are familiar with the work from WordPress Photo will understand that a lot of the work are a lot harder. Conflicts, epidemics, very very difficult subjects. So I met a lot of these photographers who spend their entire lives telling the stories of the unrepresented and risking their lives as well. And so once again, I feel like I was standing at the foot of the mountain, feeling like there is so much more to do. That's actually me, feeling really really small in the corner, feeling like an outsider, and feeling like there's so much more to learn once again.
That's always a
Um,
good feeling, right? To know that there's
it
more to
is,
get, more to learn.
it is absolutely, absolutely. So feeling small again, feeling like there is so much more to do. So I want to share the next chapter, which I was doing in conjunction with my photographic work, is that I also formed a artistic partnership with my partner, Lynn. So Lynn is an economist. She was formerly a Singapore civil servant, and so we have always looked at the world with very differing opinions, but we also have the same passion about things. And so this is one project that we have started doing since 2010. It's called the Poverty Line. It basically looks at food choices determined by a nation's statistics on where the poverty line is. And we derive the figures and we take out the budget that is allocated on food budget by a poor person living in that country. And we represent that by food that we buy from local markets and we place them on newspapers. It's a very simple visual, laden with statistics. So this is back in 2010. This is China, Beijing. And during then, the poverty line is 3.28 renminbi, which is about 50 cents US. That is for one person over an entire day, whether you can afford two, three, or even a single meal. So we went to the markets and we bought different foods from staples, carbohydrates, to what we could find proteins. In this case, we realized that for a poor person living in China for an entire day, they can afford a single chicken breast. And this is photographed on the newspapers that we procured on the day itself. And initially, we didn't know what to think of this project, but we showed it to a group of photojournalists who are our friends in Beijing, and they absolutely hated it. They were questioning the statistics. They were questioning why we will manipulate this. They were questioning why would we look at poverty this way, because this is not the conventional way to look at it. And within a week, we also met curators by chance who were in the contemporary art world. And they felt that this was very fascinating. This was very interesting. It made them think about poverty in ways that they could not imagine. And so we felt this is perhaps an interesting subject for us to take on. So we started expanding this into different parts of the world. We went to the US back in 2011, and we used the same economic methodology. So in America, the poverty line is 4.91 US dollars. And I went to different parts of Manhattan. I went to Brooklyn to buy foods. And then this is placed on newspapers. And just before the pandemic, I also went to South Africa. And over there, the poverty line is 1.81 US dollars. And what you could get would be two small cans of sardines in tomato sauce. And so since then, since 2010, we have covered 36 countries and territories in all six continents. So basically, the visual representation is very similar. In every country, we photograph everything from 50 to 100 different food items, not just the individual items that you saw just now. This was in an exhibition in Paris. And slowly, we also realized that we started getting covered in different mediums. So we were covered by mainstream media internationally. We were also covered by the photographic and the art community. And we were invited to the United Nations twice to present our works to senior government officials who would agree and disagree with our methodology, which is really eye-opening and once again very humbling, because we know that when we were talking to the officials at the UN, we were talking to people right at the forefront of how politics and agendas are formed and made. So we were doing quite a few exhibitions. Up to then, we were already doing about exhibitions in more than 10 different countries back in about 2017. And we realized that that wasn't enough. So we signed up for a bookmaking workshop, and we became students all over again. I joined a workshop in Tokyo, and we were guided by two very experienced book designers, Tun and Sandra from Netherlands. And I became a student all over again, just to learn about the craft of how do you create a vision into a photo book, which I'm sure Mark Edward Harris has a lot of experience, and he'll tell you more afterwards. But for me, I felt like a student all over again. I remember telling the designers that I want a simple book. And then on the day of my presentation, I laid out the works that we have. And I had to lay the table 3 times because we had so much work. And Tun and Sandra came to me and said, there's no way you can have a small book. We are talking about a big book here. So, and yes, and the challenges of making a book dummy. And once you get a book dummy, what happens? How do you publish a book? It's a lot of challenges. There's money. Where do you get the money? Grants. Where do you get the grants? Crowdfunding. How do you find a publisher? How do you finish the design? and what is the timeline? You go into a rabbit hole that you can never finish. I think it's incredibly challenging. For us, what we are really lucky with was that we won the Luma Book Award at the Owl Festival in southern France, and this is considered the biggest book dummy prize that one can get. It is a prize of 25,000 euros, which helps towards the production of the book itself. And we are incredibly humble. I remember I was so nervous. I went up to stage in front of thousands of people in my t-shirt. Bad idea. But they were incredibly supportive. And so this summer, we got our book. Our book is actually published in 2 languages, one in English by Swiss publisher Lars Müller, and the French edition is published by Actes And this is a 400 over page book. It's really thick, not light, and there is worldwide distribution everywhere. So right now in the US, I know it is sold in Amazon, it is sold at Walmart, it's sold at Barnes and Noble, it's sold at the MoMA store. So just in the past month, so this was only launched in September, and we are so elated to know that we are highlighted by New York Times as a top 5 read under books, under visual books, and MoMA just a week ago named The Poverty Line as one of the top 10 books of 2021, and we are right beside our idol Tyron Simon. So Tyron Simon is just here. So so for us, this feels like such an incredible journey. And if you have the chance, I invite you to purchase a copy of the book. I think it's done with a lot of passion and a lot of love. And thank you. If you want to follow me, this is my Instagram account. Chow and Lin is more of the art projects that we do. Stefen Chow, I decided to completely divide this. So what you see on Stefen Chow is all commercial editorial work and none of the Chow and Lin stuff. Thank you.
Stefan,
yes.
Did you go back to your friends who said this was a bad idea and give them copies of the book?
I really appreciated their feedback then, because I think negative feedback does not come from an irrational place. I think it comes very often from a point of view which I may not have considered, and I think part of that reaction was what really spurred us to self-finance ourselves to cover this project in 36 countries over 10 years. I mean, it's not something that one would take so much effort to do so, but we realized that perhaps this is what art can do. Art is meant to divide opinion. It's meant to invite questions and probing opinions. I don't think art is meant for you to look at it and say, that's nice, because if we showed our work to different people and people come to us and say, okay, that's nice, I'm looking for something more. And I think when we first created the Poverty Line, the reaction we got was a little bit more than we imagined. And I think that is what really spurred us to create work along with other bodies of work under Chow and Lin that doesn't try to be controversial, but it tries to answer questions that are not easy to answer. So I think that's what we really try to do, and so we thank them because we are still friends, by the way, with the friends who commented negatively. Their opinions have changed since, but I can understand why they had that reaction from the start, and I don't blame them. And I think it's incredible. I think it's incredible to have friends to offer honest and and
Yeah.
frank opinions, the same as the editor who gave me a second chance to rephotograph my editorial assignment, because the editor could have come back and say, you know what? I think our plans change. Nothing wrong on your side. We'll pay you your assignment fee along with the production fees. Have a good day.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would ever be a photographer today who is so confident with posing my subjects, dealing with multiple studio lights, and able to look at something and say that's not good enough.
So,
Um,
so do you think having been able to show your colleagues more work on that original showcase of it, they would have grabbed the idea maybe more thoroughly than
I don't.
just a few images?
Yeah,
Because
I don't know.
together, it's incredibly powerful.
You're talking about the poverty line, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I think at the start when we showed them, we only did the China case, and we had maybe about 20 images at most then, you know. So this wasn't the seminal work that has ultimately resulted. And I think it is the lack of context. During then, you know, like it was a single case. We were looking at China as a case study, not the world as a
right.
global phenomenon. So I think it was hard to look beyond that. And even ourselves, you know, even ourselves, we didn't see where this was going to go. Um, but but we had a hunch. And the hunch is maybe this will be interesting when we reach 10 countries. So
Yeah.
and so yeah, so I think it's hard to sometimes explain your long-term vision.
Yeah. So, I
And
mean, in that context, sometimes we need to flush out the idea even further to believe even more about it, right? I mean, that's sort of like a learning lesson for everyone, right? That something small needs to be grown a little bit to really grasp the weight of what it could be.
absolutely, I think, and sometimes I think the beauty about photography in the medium that we live is that it's very subjective.
Mm,
No one can agree which one is a better photo unless we ask a respected curator or a respected editor. But even then, that is subjective because you can bring another editor and they can have a complete different opinion. And I think
you got
that's
to
the
believe,
beauty
right?
of our craft. And honestly, for example, the poverty line, I don't think we have gotten to this stage if I said to myself, it's like, okay, let me get this 100% right first before we start doing other countries. I think at that point we had a hunch that this was interesting, that that this was a topic that we were willing to devote ourselves into. And it was really only by the 10 country, by the time we have done it for 5 years. And this was back in 2010. I remember 2010, poverty was not a mainstream issue. Inequality was not a topic that was discussed in mainstream newspapers. This was something that has always been prevalent in Asia. But in Asia, poverty was actually being solved because people were getting out of poverty, out of famine. But in the next 5 years, this was when Occupy Wall Street happened. This was when riots happened in capital cities in Europe, like Paris. This was when the Arab Spring happened. And this was all due to inequality. This was due to issues where people felt that the world is divided between the people who have and have nots. And
Mm,
suddenly the poverty line became sharper in focus because academics, journalists felt the topic that we did had a certain resonance to it. It doesn't have all the answers, but it certainly was a topic that they felt was relevant of our times. But we started the project back in 2010 without knowing, ourselves
where it was
included,
going.
that this was going to be a topic that was going to be discussed. So in some ways, perhaps
Ahead of its time.
the advice is do whatever you are passionate in, do whatever you are believe in, and if you stick on it long enough, the wave will somehow get
Find
you.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just last question. Like, can you speak just for a moment about the collaborative process between you and your partner on how that worked? You know, the give and take, the pushing back and forth. You know, all that good stuff. If she's there, let her
Um,
join us.
yeah. Yes. Lynn is very, very different from me. Her personality is not as go-getter as me. In fact, I'll just put her in right now.
Hey,
So
Lynn,
so
thank you
that's
for
Lynn.
joining.
She went to send our kids to school this morning, just came back. And so Lynn is actually an economist. She has a very different personality from me. I'm slightly more alpha, more extroverted. She's more introverted, but definitely far more intellectual. And I think at the beginning of our work, we had a lot of disagreements because I wanted something more dynamic. She felt she wanted something that fit closer to what her studies have found. And I think the visual that you see is really a combination of both of us. You want to add anything to it? Yeah. So I think because of that,
Okay.
the collaboration between us is actually 50-50. It's not just the fact that I was doing the photographs and she was contributing the statistics. It was more than that. When we first created our first visual, we basically agreed and disagreed on what we want to create. So and right now she's even more qualified than me. She's actually doing her MFA. She previously had a
Wow.
degree in economics. She had an MBA, and now she's doing her MFA. Whereas for me, I'm always self-taught. I have an engineering degree, and that's it.
Okay. Well, I mean that was a great presentation. We appreciate that very much. And I mean, my God, we could have a 5 hour conversation around that. But that's really terrific work, both of you. That you guys should be very proud. And everyone, you can buy this book on Amazon anywhere. Show it again in 2 different languages. So, Stefan, I thank you very very much for coming on. Lynn, thank you as
Yes.
well. That's really wonderful. So we're just going to take a quick minute or two break. We're going to get Abby up and ready to go and off we go. So just everyone stretch a little bit. We'll be back in just a minute. Jay, let's get Abby up. Great job, Stefan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm just gonna grab a water. Oh, okay. Hey Ted, hey Noon. Seeing everyone in there. That's great to see everybody. Dave Moser, Ingeborg, Spires, Miss Saba. All right. So Stefan, if you could stop sharing, right? And we get Abby to share.
All right. Here we go. Is that coming through okay?
It looks perfect, Abby.
All right. Let's see. Oops, hold on one second. There we go. Okay, well first, Frank, thank you. This is fantastic. It's great to be in phenomenal company, and I'm happy to be here.
Great.
I am a commercial freelance photographer. I'm primarily based in Washington, D.C. I've been spending some time in Florida and frequently going back and forth. It's a nice change of scenery. I like the palm trees. This body of work, it's called Well Rounded, and it's a body of work about the power and potential of the bald head. And these images I'm showing you right now they kind of show you my vision before I started photographing baldness. Two important things here. My mother's a hairdresser. She's a retired hairdresser now, and so hair has always been part of my identity growing up. And for some reason, I see hairstyles in nature. My family has also always been, we're plant people. I'm a plant person. My parents are plant people. My grandparents were, and my great grandparents were. So, yes, I'm very much inspired by elements in nature. Um, the flat top to me looks, these are ornamental grasses cut short, that mimics a flat top. And the next one, it's an Osage Orange, which they just fascinate me. They're so bizarre. um, this next slide, I suppose, it shows you kind of how I see, I guess, when I'm outside. A lot of these are just, they're past their prime. These are clematis that have dried. That to me looks like movement, hair, and the acorn to me, kind of mimics a bald head. If you take the cap off an acorn, it's like a man that is taking his hat off. So that is pretty much what started this. But since then, it has grown into uh, just many different avenues. As you can see, the guy down in the left bottom, is kind of my acorn with the hat off. But this is, it's a large range of, some are highly graphic, some show the lines and curves, some, there's always seems to be some element of play that's often carried out through this body of work. Plants continue forward. Movement is another theme I've played with.
And Abby, look, when did you realize, like, I'm going to pursue this, I'm going to go further? Like, when did you say, there's something really here that I want to explore, and you just kept on going?
Immediately.
Is that right?
Yeah. At first, believe it or not, I really wanted to use acorns. Like I envisioned a close-up macro of an acorn and a close-up of somebody's head, and then I wanted to do two people and two acorns, but that became difficult for me because it just, the forms and faces, and it I did not successfully finish that. I might go back to it at some point. So but from the very beginning, and kind of what you and Stefen were mentioning before, it's projects evolve. This, I didn't know what this was going to be when I started it. It kind of has a mind of its own, which I think sometimes can be very difficult if you don't have, or I suppose constraints kind of, in my mind, they help the creative process move forward.
Right.
But yes.
And do you share it with your mom?
Did I share this with my mom?
Yeah. Do you share, like, what you're doing and, how she sees it?
I've shared this with her. I'm not sure she gets it.
Okay.
But overall, just a little introduction for it. Well-rounded, explores the power and potential of the bald head. A lot of times that I photograph the head kind of as shapes and abstractions, which help to, in my mind, distance the story that we tell about other people. And it allows the viewer to tell a new story, to see the colors, the shapes, the composition, and not be able to connect the typical story that they would normally tell themselves. To me, baldness is very much a blank canvas, and I think it offers a freedom that hair cannot. This picture right here is this is the last of them. So I've been doing this for 10 years, and I photographed Orly. I photographed her at the end of last summer. She has, I'm not sure if she has or if she had a rare form of liver cancer. And it was a very different experience photographing her. She felt fragile to me. There's just a very different energy. But she also, as a kid, she was very much coming into her own. And I think these pictures help her in a different way. Like I never went into this I like the idea of helping people, but that wasn't my overall goal. I think that's a difficult thing to do sometimes. So yeah, I brought plants to the scene. I walked around Home Depot for a while and was inspired by the coleus plant and just some wholesalers that had beautiful plants that I could use. Let's see, and this here, so we were, I say we because the subjects were featured as well. This is a quote from Orly. Something I wanted to bring up was pairings. Recently, I've had an exhibit. It's in the Crystal City Metro, so it's a public exhibit. It's of 49 of these images, and sometimes having an understanding myself of such a big body of work is difficult. So with some help, I was advised to pair some pictures together, and that has made the biggest difference. I've very much enjoyed looking at the shapes. There's always some type of connection, and this is how the exhibit is actually designed. That the picture on the other side of the hallway, which I do have pictures of the actual exhibit, which I can show you at the end, but the picture on the opposite side has something to do with the other. Some are more obvious. Sometimes it's the same person. The image on the right, I'm sorry, no, the image on the left was taken at a kids camp for alopecia. I had a unique opportunity to join, and this is one of the speakers. It's an amazing group of people. It's for an organization called CAP, Children's Alopecia Project, and they're all
Tell
about.
us what alopecia is.
Alopecia is basically where the immune system it destroys hair follicles. So there's different types of it. Sometimes you lose hair in patterns. Sometimes you have no hair from eyebrows to eyelashes. So it's not as well. It's an autoimmune disease, is what it is. So yeah, this camp that I went to, it was really kind of a magical experience. These adults and children, they're free to basically roam and be themselves, and there was a freedom that they had that just it felt deeper. They didn't have to deal with stares. They didn't have to deal with questions of why they have no hair, and to just be able to observe these kids and these adults in this environment, it was very much a remarkable thing. And this is the quote from the woman on the right. There's really a wide variety of feeling behind losing their hair. This is a model that I worked with or saw frequently in DC, and one day she went from long hair to short hair, and she agreed to pose for me. I worked with a phenomenal makeup artist. Her name is Connie Sang, and all of us collaborated together for these images. With this model, you don't really have to tell her how to move. She's excellent at it. So I just kind of followed her lead a little bit. And here we were trying to go for like a statuesque type of feel. There's a couple other images where she is covered in the head, but I enjoyed the process of covering her too. This is part of the above down series of work. And I think what's interesting about this is to me, baldness is a component of the image. It kind of goes along with contrast and symmetry. And there is an element of play. I've always enjoyed that, the tennis balls or the party hats. But to get this, we actually, with some help, I was able to rig my camera to the ceiling and tether it to an iPad. So I photographed it from the iPad. But yeah, this is, I don't know, this was very much a team effort.
And how long have you been doing this now, Abby?
I've been doing this for 10 years. Yeah. This too kind of shows just, I don't know, I suppose like how I see. Structures and framing the head and colors and playfulness. And again, back to the pairings. I never put these two pictures together before, but I love putting them together during the exhibit. It's amazing how simple movements can frame the head. Henry to the left I joke with him, he's my muse. He let me photograph him plenty of times. These, again, just smaller shapes that frame the head. The woman on the left was one of my last subjects as well, before the little girl, Orly. She had just recently started embracing her own baldness and going without a wig, but she was all for it. We did this during COVID as well. And I don't really have too much to say about these. I'm gonna just continue to show. If you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, but I mean, put them in the chat room. And how do you, as you're reaching out to subjects, how do you preface, asking them to shoot, with you?
I'm good at approaching strangers, I think.
Oh, so totally strangers, okay.
A lot of them were. Some were acquaintances, some were strangers. And I had some no's. That's okay. But
how do you light it?
Oh, they're all different.
Yeah.
These were natural. This is a window on the left. I believe it was even like a small window. We contained the light, and which gave a beautiful effect. The ones with the above down, that was, I believe, just 3 even light sources, umbrellas placed around the room. This little girl, Hannah, I believe we shot this in 2013. So she has no hair. She has alopecia, and I don't think she's ever had hair.
So a subject like that, does she recognize that she's stunningly beautiful?
I don't know. I really,
or at least captivating.
I do know that her mother told me she used to not post pictures of herself on Facebook. She didn't want to, or at least maybe she didn't tell her mom to post pictures, but she was okay with this picture. So it did something for her.
Oh, so after you sent it to her, she loved it so much that she did present it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. This was actually the first person I photographed. This was back in 2011.
So that's an interesting thing, that this image stands the test of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
This is Seth Godin. He is my creative hero, and I had the opportunity to photograph him. I actually sent him some greeting cards, and he wrote back, I don't know, a couple days later and said that basically said, "How can I help?" So a couple months later, I packed up my car, went up to New York, and we made this image. And the concept behind it is contained creativity. So
Mm.
I've taken a lot of his workshops. I like how he speaks about marketing and connecting with people. It's probably one of the only things that I don't know that it just really connects with me. And his workshops are set up so you work with other people and you give constructive feedback for their own projects, and that has been extremely helpful over the years. But yeah, so these workshops go on for a couple of months. You end up becoming close to the people. It's really is just a remarkable thing. I think anybody in the creative process needs to have people that they can bounce ideas off of, just talk wording. I mean, it's hard to connect all the pieces.
Mm. And who was this guy again? Somebody's asking.
Seth Godin, he's a marketer and he's an author. He has like 19 bestsellers, I believe. The course that I was in with him was it was the first session. It was called the Creatives Workshop. And his most recent book was called The Practice. So, which I think is fascinating. The creative practice itself, it has a lot to do with structure and an element of whimsical, an element of play. And that's kind of the concept that I went with this, that contained creativity.
And have you published some of this work? Or
Some of
how do you promote this?
just social channels.
Okay.
It was published, well, not his picture wasn't published, but it was published in the Lily, the Washington Post recently, and a couple years ago it was featured in the Washington Post magazine.
And you sell prints and postcards and all of that, right?
I do, yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes. This is, I don't know, I love this. This guy's fantastic, and to me, so many of these images could be their own spin-offs. I would love to do more with this. Have more hairstyles, have different color noodles. I think it would be a lot of fun.
I don't know if somebody remembers, and you could put it in the chat room if you remember that there was a photographer that we actually had on projections who did a series with everyone with red hair, and then they got to do a shot with him on their fantasy, but it was all redhead kids and redhead adults. The name slips my mind. I think it's something. His first name was with a D, but it's someone will remember. It wasn't Joel, but
I am
yeah. Somebody's there. Let's see.
I don't know what that was. I Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're fine. Totally fine. Yeah.
I am familiar with that. I have seen his work
Oh,
before.
you see. Okay. I forget his name now.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the exhibit.
Wow.
It lines the hallway. Basically through those glass doors is the Crystal City Metro. This came about, well, it's sponsored by National Landing Business Improvement District. And initially I really wanted this to be exhibited in public. Through this process, I've just been a big fan of public art. And to me, baldness is a hairstyle. That's what it feels like to me, because I don't have a personal story with it myself. So I treat it as a hairstyle. And I want these images to be experienced in passing. I think something different happens to the brain when you can't control some of the external elements.
Mm.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love for this to be in a gallery as well. But I really do enjoy the public art form of this. So yeah, at first I was trying to just get it on windows, commercial buildings on windows in passing. And then it just so happened that this business improvement district had these pre-installed frames and an exhibit that needed to be changed. So I was able to use all of them.
Beautiful.
Let's see. And yeah, wait a second. Okay, this is just kind of an outtake. The subjects I work with are amazing. I obviously spent way too much time with these guys, but I really am just so grateful. Every person, they come into my studio and they give me the space to create, which is so important. And yeah, obviously here, I don't think they're having fun anymore. They want to go home. But I mean, basically, I do want this body of work to continue. I'm not exactly sure where it's going, but I want to show the beauty of baldness. I want to be able to look past certain taboos, and I want it to just open up room for, a greater conversation. I think we could go beyond baldness, and this can address diversity, inclusivity, body positivity. So I'm hopeful that this body of work can continue in that direction.
And when is something for you over? Like when do you like? So do you feel you're in the middle of this, three quarters, just beginning? Stefan had a very long project with his poverty line. I mean, how does that work for you? Or it's over when you just know?
I mean, great question. I've never felt like this project was over. The exhibit certainly did something different. Something.
It marked time.
What's that?
It sort of marks time when you have a gallery show, right?
Yeah. Yes. And I think in the process of making this work, I've always wanted to tie in the stories, but my art is so different. So I had a hard time figuring out how do the stories match the art? Do I try and make it match the art? But having it up as a group did something to the participants, seeing them interact with their own pictures, seeing them see themselves as part of something bigger. Something changed with the exhibit.
Yeah, and in the context of the exhibit, T. Lawrence asked, "Tell us more about the pre-installed frames." You just mentioned it. Can you give a little bit more background about that?
Yeah, they're snap frames.
Okay.
Very easy install. You just snap the print right into it. But yeah, I guess they're drilled into that wall. I didn't look behind them. I couldn't look behind them. But yeah, they just line the entire hallway.
Okay. I don't know if that answers it for you, Lauren. So you got a lot of great reviews here in the chat room. You have to go. You have to look. So what's next, Abby? I mean, what else are you doing while you're doing this? And if this is what it is, then it's fine. That's two.
It's what's next. That is a good question too. I mean, I balance my creative work with my commercial work. I wouldn't mind I might take a little break from this one for a moment. Just
Okay.
see how it feels to just step away and let it marinate a little bit. I do have other projects.
Right.
Again, flower related, plant related.
Right.
But yeah, I balance this with the other work that I do.
All right. So tell us a little bit about. I know you're selling postcards and prints. Tell us, people can get that on the wellrounded.com site.
Yeah, yep. Prints are available. I sold my first one recently. They're
Right.
Yeah, it is. It's
That's
beautiful.
another marking of time, right?
Yeah, actually, yes, it is very much. Um, I have two sizes of limited edition, 1 through 25. Off the top of my head, I don't know the sizes. And then I have around an 11 by 17 size that's not editioned. And the cards are just, there's about 5 or 6 of them in a pack, something small. And part of that goes to uh, Children's Alopecia Project as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Abby. That was great.
Thank
That's
you.
really, really, really terrific. So again, we'll take a little break. And Abby, you should really look into the chat room. We have so many nice comments in there for you.
Oh, thank you.
Um, we'll take a little break and we'll get Mr. Harris up in just a moment, and we'll see his work.
So Frank, I've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Okay.
Freshen up your drink, and we're ready to go. You know what you could do, Abby? You could put in the chat room your organization there for that particular disease, so that people can, if they want to do some research on it, they can.
Sure, of course.
So now, knowing that your mom, was a hairstylist, I look at your hair in a totally different way.
Yeah. It's very interesting being or having a mother as a hairdresser. It calms me, and it really has impacted my entire childhood. Just
I bet.
good hairstyles, bad hairstyles. I mean, I've had them all, and I don't know, it's fun. I definitely feel a lot more open-minded with it.
Great. It's like the kid whose parents are the shoemaker, right? You look at shoes
Yeah.
in a different way.
Yep.
Okay, I'm officially back here.
All right, here's the big man.
Okay.
You take over the screen. You take over the universe. It's all yours.
Okay, so I should
Mark
first-
Edward Harris, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Let me see if I can. Did I take it over yet? Here it goes.
There you go.
Good. Perfect. Good. And thank you, first of all, Frank and Jay, for setting this up, and Abby and Stefen. It's great to share the evening with you. So I'm going to go fairly quickly because I've got a lot of images, but the idea being that telling stories through photos, and as Stefen mentioned earlier, I do love books, and you can see behind me that I do have a lot of books. So that's still my key way, I think, of looking at images and getting images out. Of course, I love going to galleries and other ways. I'm a very late bloomer on Instagram, but once I found that, I find that a very useful way. But so sequencing images, and so that first set was in Vietnam, and that's really the first body of work that I think gave me some recognition. But I continued on moving more and more toward documentary work, even though I started off on the Merv Griffin show. I'm not sure how many people in the audience remembers Merv. Now that's starting to be a long time ago. But that was a great experience.
That's a time capsule there, Mark.
It really is. And 83 to 86 was the Merv Griffin show for me. And I really needed the show to end to move on with my career, because it was such a great gig. I enjoyed it. I actually did the green room and then would take photos of guests. And so a friend of mine once said that I could be replaced by a Coke machine because I was doing a green room, basically serving drinks. That was what it meant. So anyway, so then, and this is out of order in terms of books and projects, but North Korea ties in with my love of history, and my master's is a special major I created called Pictorial Documentary History. Always loved the National Geographic approach to things.
How did you get into North Korea, Mark?
Well, I guess saying making a right at Beijing is not good enough. But
No.
Basically, no, it's difficult. but I had been before, well, first in 2005, but the big break came in 2008 when I went with the New York Philharmonic to document their historic concert there. And I had an exhibition of that work, and they couldn't, the North Koreans, one of the conditions of the New York Philharmonic agreeing to go would be that the journalists could come in, and then the North Koreans could not say who could go and who couldn't. So the Korea Society and the New York Philharmonic put together a list, and I was able to get on that list and go in and document it. And then I had an exhibition of that work, and the North Korean ambassador to the UN came to it and really thought I was very balanced. I didn't have a political statement, and I just showed what I saw there. And the ambassador said, I'll sign off on your visa anytime you want to go. And so I've gone 10 times.
Wow.
And a lot of work. I mean, one time, I teamed up with Pico Iyer. So anybody who, he's an amazing writer, and we did something for Vanity Fair on the film industry there. And I mean, a lot of these could have backstories, but when you first get there, you go to the statue. It used to be, when I first started going, it was just Kim Il-sung, the founder. But then his son died, Kim Jong-il, was on the right, and they put two of these gigantic statues up. And then, so you go, you don't have to give flowers. You just have to be, respectful, which I always am wherever I go. And this is the Arirang Mass Games, which is really an amazing thing to see. And so in the background are actually kids holding up placards. And so I do a little more detail shot with a 180 than Nikkor 180. And you can see, then also on the floor of the stadium, they have, mass dancers. So, and this is shot straight, but the lighting people of the stadium put a blue gel on, which worked for I think the scene. And I've been all over the country, and so people could say, "Oh, they're just taking you to where they want you to see things." And it's definitely true that they try to stop you from taking shots that will give a bad light on the country. But you get to really know people, especially after 10 times. And the whole country is not being turned upside down for a couple of foreigners going around the country. And so we really are seeing the reality of what's there. Sometimes it's frustrating that we can't always document something, like when we're driving somewhere. I said, could you please stop? And they'll look at their watch and say, no, we got to get to the next statue or something. But still, in all, through all that, you do get a good sense. And so, and Frank, thanks for mentioning that we should show some books and things. So I'll just hold up right here. This book won the 2013 or 14 Book of the Year at the IPA Awards, called North Korea. And so if anybody wants to see more in depth what I did there, I would say, check out North Korea. Not Inside North Korea, which I did with Chronicle Books very early on, but just called North Korea.
And they can see them on your site.
Oh yeah, that's true. All right. If you go to my website, markedwardharris.com, or you go to Instagram, or you go to Amazon, I think you can track it down. But just make sure it's the North Korea one, not the Inside North Korea. And there's also another book called North Korea, so it should be the one that's tied in with my name. But you can see the sequence of it. And so when I teach workshops, I do talk about establishing shots, environmental portraits. Like you can see, number 2 is an environmental portrait, a portrait of a person in a scene. Number 3 is more of an eye. The eyes are the window to the soul sort of shot. But you can see, as we're moving through the sequence, by the time you get to the very last image, that's at the JSA, which is the Joint Security Area at Panmunjom. Those are actually South Korea people in South Korea who have come up from Seoul to visit the DMZ. And that's a South Korean soldier in the background and the North Korean soldiers in the foreground. So it's a fascinating place. then another book that I did that's one of my favorite, I guess it's like, with having children, you're not supposed to say who's the favorite, even though you might have one. But my book on Japanese hot springs, because I love the Japanese hot spring experience. As Steven was talking about editorial things earlier, I'm sure Abby knows as well from her work. Where was I going to go with about the editorial thing? Oh, about doing full sequences of images. If things don't work, you got to toss them out. And I think that Stefen was very brave showing the shot that didn't work, and then what did, and that's just amazing. And so I've had experiences, where I'll look at something and say, "Wow, that didn't really work." Even in a documentary sense, I will go back to a place and shoot again. I really try to make things right, and I'm not setting models up or anything like that, but I am. These are sometimes, friends of mine, or it's just strictly, reportage where I don't know the people at all. But I've traveled hundreds, if not thousands of miles, to a onsen. These are all in Japan, obviously, but where something I thought, wow, this is such a great onsen or ryokan, but I really didn't get the shot I liked. I mean, this is just so you know, in the foreground, that's my ex-wife in the water, and she's checking out that guy walking, which I'm not so thrilled about, but what can you do? So I'm just joking around. So, well, that is my ex-wife. I'm not joking about that part. And she is looking to the right, but she's allowed to look. But anyway, so this is in a place called Ginzan Onsen. And so I do know the people that are photographed completely nude. I'm not saying do this or that. I really think, as Mary Ellen Mark told me years ago, you can't do better than reality. And I really think that's true. And I always like to have people, even if I'm shooting mostly a scenic, I really think it's important to anchor it with people in this type of situation. And a lot of these, the earlier ones were done in film. And so this is Ilford 3200, with the grain. And this is where I discovered the Japanese bath in Beppu on the southern island of Kyushu. And I just fell in love with it.
And Mark, how long ago is this series of images?
But this series continues to the present, because I'm now in the book's in its third edition. Wow. And it's had just countless usages in in-flight magazines, just all sorts of magazines all over the world.
Look, it's just sort of interesting how long that photograph still bothers you, that your wife is looking at that guy.
Yeah, that's fun. No, I don't actually. She's still. What's a female saint called? A saintress or something? I don't know. Or is it just a saint still? But she is to me. I mean, we're still super close.
Yeah.
In fact, that's Mika again. When I was over in Japan for the Olympics and Paralympics, we broke bread a couple of times. We're family forever, for sure. But it's better for her to live in Japan for her work and this is a friend of mine. So as Edward Buba talked about mise en scène, put in scene, and he says how it wasn't that way. There are images like this where I had my friend, walk behind the shoji screen, and I positioned her for this sort of shot. I wouldn't do it in a bath, but for this, I did do it. And so this is a closer. And so when I'm talking about sequencing again, and actually that's what I meant to say earlier when it slipped my mind, is the importance of sequencing. And so this is a good closer. I have other shots that work as closers as well. You can see in this sequence how you get out of the bath, you put on a yukata, and then you go back to your room and you have some tea. And that's actually a real shot of Mika wearing a heavy coat. This is in the winter in southern Kyushu, and drinking tea from the other side of a round window with a shoji screen in it, which just Japanese architecture is unbelievable. But you see how this sort of takes you.
Yeah. So Mark, a question for you.
Sure.
When you're shooting
Yeah.
When you're shooting, are you thinking of the sequencing where you're going to end up, or that just sort of naturally happens for you?
That's a fantastic question. And the reality is it's like shooting a movie. It's very rare that a movie or a TV show, or especially a movie, will be shot in the order that it ends up.
Right.
You shoot what makes sense. And so I'm really just shooting what feels right, what's visually striking. And that's in any story. Like if I'm doing illustrating a story for a travel magazine, in flight or whatever. But then I'll start to look at the work and start moving things around and seeing what's missing. And then I will try to plug in those holes, like, wow, I'm really missing an ending shot here. How do I wrap it up? Or do I need a detail shot? Like here, number 9 is just you can see the the Zori that is needed. Well, it's not needed, but it makes sense. You're in the outside, you slip those on, and then you go inside, you take a bath, and then you get into the yukata. So I am looking, especially closers. And then because of my love of Japan, and I do speak Japanese fairly decently, depending on who you're asking. When the tsunami happened, I went back fairly quickly. The same things that create the onsen and the incredible experience of the onsen also create, unfortunately, earthquakes and tsunamis. And so it's on the ring of fire. And so just like living out here in LA, we're on the ring of fire. Earthquakes are a possibility. Japan, as an island nation, gets 10% of all seismic activity. And because it's all coastline, they really get hit by tsunamis. And the one in 2011 was beyond belief. And so this, regardless of the heaviness of the subject matter, it's still the same approach in terms of looking for an establishing shot. And maybe this was shot, in reality, halfway through what I was shooting there. And this sort of reminds me of the Wizard of Oz in a way, just that utter devastation as if a tornado came through, but this was water and hundreds of miles of coastline. And I got there in time. A friend of mine I worked with volunteered to go up the coast with me. There was no train transportation, so he drove, and we got to Sendai at 11 o'clock at night. Checked into a hotel, went to our rooms, and then about 11:30 we had a 7.1. It was actually called the Miyagi earthquake. It was basically almost, the epicenter was right under our hotel, and went on forever. And we were evacuated, and I'm the world's slowest evacuee, I've got to say. I had just taken everything apart and had to put it back together and get down the stairs, but I made it out, obviously. And then we would sleep the rest of the trip out in parking lots or whatever. But I would purposely, when I would see something like this, I wouldn't just shoot and move on to the next place. And when I teach workshops, I always talk about that. What are the odds of you being at the right place at the right time, all the time? Isn't it better to shoot less and wait for things? And so I saw that if I climbed up on this pile of rubble, I could get this shot, and then I just wanted to wait till somebody came through to give a sense of perspective and scale. And so I just stood there with my camera down and waited. And then as soon as somebody came through, I shot and moved on. And I'll frequently do that, or I'll look for natural frames like this shot. And then for Vanity Fair, I went back 5 years afterwards and started interviewing people that had been affected by mostly by the tsunami. Japanese structures are built so well that relatively few people are killed by earthquakes, but the tsunami obliterated almost 20,000 people. And so many heartbreaking stories that happen. And this is this long-term project as well, because now I've been back. In fact, when I was there for the Olympics, I went back again to this area. And so now this has become a 10-year project. But for Vanity Fair, I did something on the 5-year project. And this is just shot, with window light, and then his story. And I've learned to marry the pen with the photograph instead of always begging writers like, hey, can we go do this? What do you think of this? I've learned to write well enough to illustrate my own photos, with words, and that's definitely helped out a lot. And so in terms of a closing shot, this is actually in Alaska, and this is and I really shouldn't learn how to pronounce this better, flotsam. I don't know if some people say flotsam, but flotsam, that came across all the way from Japan, and in 5 years made it to the Alaska coast. And so I used a flash for a flash fill on this this mannequin head, so I wouldn't blow out the sky. I could balance the two. And so that was a closer for my latest work. I didn't shoot this or see this in time for the Vanity Fair story.
So Mark, just let me interrupt you.
Sure.
So as you shoot, because I'm listening to you and you have this incredible wealth of knowledge on how to do a story and getting this and being there and waiting and all of that. At any moment or at any time, do you find yourself that's almost a burden to know how to do it versus just getting in and doing it? I don't know if that's really a good question, but there's something about running and gunning, right?
Yeah.
And just doing it because you're in the moment.
Oh yeah. Well, that's really how I approach it. I would say most of my work in a reportage situation is running and gunning, and then I start assembling later and seeing what's missing. And definitely when covering, the Olympics,
right?
This particular shot would not answer that question. Other shots would, where I literally am running across the field or somewhere else, is like, wow, that's a great opportunity. And then, think later. In other words, better to shoot now, think later. I agree with you 100%. And I would say most of my work, as I say, in a reportage, or wildlife, whatever I'm shooting is that. But then I really do stop and think and see where it will go in the big picture. But this, I actually went to the stadium a couple of days before it opened, thinking I really want to get a good establishing shot. And what's an angle? And most of the photographers were, I don't think I have a pointer on this. I should learn how to do that. But basically, the front is, if you look over on the left side of the camera left, there's that white sort of strip. That's where the VIPs are sitting, and that's where the main camera positions are. But the stadium, National Stadium, is much longer in this direction. And I thought, wow, this would really be dynamic. Everybody's going to be shooting from the left side. Why don't I shoot here? And since I had been there a few days earlier and saw the configuration of the stadium, this is the position I requested. There were so many COVID protocols in place that you really had to say in advance where you were going to be, to a degree. It was not like you just show up and say, I want to go to this event or this event. It wasn't enough having press credentials. You actually had to, at least the day before, put in a request so they wouldn't have too many press people at that event in the same day.
That's really incredible. Like, to go there a few days to scout it all out, to get it right, even though it's going to be a spontaneous moment. There's a photographer, well-known, world-known photojournalist, and I couldn't mention his name. He'd kill me. But he covered the falling of the Berlin Wall. And he said he never got a good shot out of it. Just because he was young, he wasn't prepared. To your point about, thinking these things through as you're shooting and before you're shooting, all of that, because that establishing shot of the Olympics is really great, right? That sets up everything.
Yeah, it really,
for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. Now, are you guys seeing at the bottom of the screen? Are you seeing where it says "Stop sharing your screen"? Is that are you guys seeing this, or am I just seeing it on mine? Maybe.
No, that's just you.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Right, and so this is about, and this is also preconceived. It's like, okay, I really want to get the signage in there, And so instead of just following her everywhere, why don't I wait until she comes through the scene? So I pre-composed, but and then I also then sort of followed her too, so until this position, but I had in mind to shoot signage, knowing in particular that the 2020 games were really, the miracle games, that, to have them take place during COVID when only 22% of Japanese at that time had been vaccinated, and you're bringing the world in. So you could see that I purposely wanted to get signage in and waited for things to happen through the scene. But of course, you have to know the technical aspects, super fast shutter speed, about 25/100th of a second, to freeze people in the air. The cameras are so amazing these days. And I did borrow a D6, because usually I shoot with a Nikon D850, but I really wanted the speed and everything else that goes along with it, Nikon D6. I just did buy the Z9, which hopefully will arrive in time to take to Antarctica in December. But this is the Paralympics. And so for Newsweek, this ended up as a double-page spread opener of a 6-page spread during the 9/11 issue, the 20-year anniversary. But her backstory is incredible. So if you guys want to know about it, maybe check out the Newsweek story online. I think you can find that version. But the print edition, I love how they did the double-page spread. So many fascinating backstories out of the Paralympics. Part of the motivation for that might be that I grew up with a father with polio, and how he really was a great athlete, even though he had just one dangling arm. He had one good arm, but the other was dangling, and a curved spine, but he could hit golf balls, play table tennis. Just an amazing guy. But often, looking for other angles, for reverse angle on this. I'm not sure if the photographers shooting the other way are super thrilled. The guy at the very bottom middle obviously isn't getting me in a shot, but I was in a legal camera position, but trying to frame the gymnast there. So fast shutter speeds once again. The photographers were on a platform lower, but I thought if I went high up in the stadium, I could shoot something that might be a little different from everybody else. And this is once again the Paralympic games, and her backstory is incredible. One after another. She's from Sri Lanka, and she had a hand grenade which blew her hands off. The Paralympian that I showed you earlier, that the Newsweek, her parents, she was illegitimate. She was born in Vietnam. Her parents were married to other people, and so they tried to commit suicide to be together for eternity. And they tried to take their little girl, who was 14 months at the time, with her. But she survived, lost her legs. And then in this case, she had a hand grenade. Now this, Frank, what do you think, or anybody else want to say, what do you think the backstory is here? Like when you just see it from a purely visual point of view.
Well, it's sheer exhaustion.
Yeah.
I don't know if it doesn't look, could she be? Yeah, she could be a marathoner.
Oh no, she's right. But what do you think about, what about the woman leaning over her?
I think she's just making sure she's all right. That would be
the assumption, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, I watched this woman for the whole time. She was trying to rush everybody. It's normal after these unbelievable, races, and it wasn't a marathon, but it was a long race. But even under shorter races, these athletes just put everything into it, and they're exhausted. So over every race, they just sort of collapse for a minute or two. But this person's job was to just hustle people off the track
for the next event.
Yeah, so she hayaku onegai shimasu, hurry up. It was just unbelievable. And so it looks like she's really concerned, but it was a bit too on a case. And I love Japan, obviously, but it was a bit too sticking to protocol and let's clear the track for the next race.
There's a schedule to keep, Mark.
Oh, for sure. But
right?
It wasn't so bad here, but it's interesting. And I'm not religious, but the person from Spain laying here sort of looks like a religious icon, right?
Yeah. And she looks so comfortable with her one foot over the other. Like she really is, she could be on the beach.
Exactly. But I mean, it's just incredible to see these athletes. And so now we're going in a very different direction. So this is with my think tank bag and my Nikons, or actually, I guess this is Mind Shift, which is by think tank as well. But basically, this is how I am working in the jungles in Borneo. And Stefen was talking about working in Malaysia in the jungle. I'm not a big fan of mosquitoes and things. And so I really try to wear non-mosquito attracting clothing. And it seemed to work fairly well. And this was done for a project that eventually became the people of the forest. And the word orangutan actually translates as orangutan, people of the forest, because they look and act so similar to us, or it's only fair to say we act and look so similar to them. Maybe that's the Libra coming out in me, but I see that I put this together too quickly and I shouldn't have pulled one of those out, but here we go. So this was shot not in the jungles, obviously, but these were in controlled environments at zoos and rescue centers around the world, actually. And I lit them at first with pro photo and completely overwhelmed the ambient light. And so it looked like a studio, or in certain places I could bring a black fabric and have the handlers, or not really handlers, because it's the zookeepers put them on a tree stump, and we did it. Sometimes it's shot through plexiglass or a mesh wire fence.
And this is all images from your book.
Yeah, this is from
another book that Mark did.
Yeah, exactly. So that's from this book here, The People of the Forest. That was actually got first place in the nature book category of the IPA awards. And my good friend Sandro Miller, he and I were up. We were, I don't want to say against each other, but we were in the same category. So fortunately, neither of us won the big one, or we wouldn't be talking to each other anymore. No, I guess
he's a great guy.
He's a great guy, isn't he? Amazing photographer, and I will talk about him at the very end when
this one looks like Sandro.
It's funny because he said he thought the whole book was a self-portrait of me, so that's funny. he did some very intense portraits of me. We first met in India at a workshop there, but it is incredible. We have 96.4 to 97% of the same DNA between humans, orangutans, and humans and Sandro, about the same. So that looks like the thinker, obviously. I mean, it's just an incredible, obviously part of the motivation is we have huge issues in the remaining two areas where orangutans are in the wild, and that's Borneo and Sumatra, and that's it. And so if we keep losing the forest to palm oil plantations, we're going to have a big, it's going to be the end of orangutans in the wild. But it's not that simple as saying, oh, well, we should stop making palm oil because the world needs oils, and palm oil is in almost everything, but it has to be done sustainably. And there's a whole spiel about that, but that is something to really look at for people is palm oil, and there are companies that use it and farm it, and they get labels on it that show that they're doing it in a way that's not hurting the environment or taking away the forest. But so I went to rescue centers, a Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation, and that's where these orangutans are on pre-release islands, and so either their mother was killed and they came as orphans and grew up, and then they had to learn the skills in jungle school to then be released. And so a halfway house are these pre-release islands where they're not giving that much food and they have to start fending for themselves, but it's still somewhat of a controlled environment where somebody on a boat will come by and throw some food over to them, and so they can eat, so they're not going to starve to death. And if they can't make it, then they'll just be kept there. But the goal is to get them back out in the wild. And then these are orangutans in the wild that I'm shooting as well. So I did a combination of things in Borneo. And this book is a product of COVID, because I wanted to go to Sumatra first before doing a book. But since I was here, I thought, and stuck here, I thought I might as well put this out now. We can always do another edition. But these are all orphaned orangutans, their mothers having wandered into palm oil plantations and being killed, or that these are rescues from the illegal black market for trade, and they were taken. And so this is the final part of the presentation, which
let me ask you one question, Mark.
Sure.
One question. A lot of times photographers they do their projects, and they become advocates.
Yeah. For
domestic violence, for you save the forest, any of those things. Do you get the, like, with doing a project like that, like how far does that grab you into the issue?
Well, that's a great question, and you picked the perfect one to for that discussion. I had just done the portraits only, and then some of the photos ended up in a magazine, and then the Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation in Switzerland contacted me and asked if they could use some of the images for a campaign they were doing to help the orangutans for this Orangutan Survival Foundation. And I said yes, and then we started talking, and then they said, would you do a pro bono and come with us to Borneo and shoot what we're actually doing there? And so I said sure, and so I did. And then the more I shot that, the more I got into it. I have now become an advocate, and a lot of my photos are being used to raise money for in the US. There's a place in Florida that's Center for Great Apes. I'm working with. They use my photos. The Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation is using it. I have an exhibition in Sydney starting on Thursday. And Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation there hopefully will get some of the benefit from that because their name's being mentioned, and I'm letting everybody use the photos. And so definitely, I was not aware of the situation with orangutans, particularly before I started the project. It was actually something that I accidentally came across at the International Orangutan Center in Indianapolis when I was doing a general travel story, and then that just sort of went out.
Yeah, it just you don't know where it's going to come from.
I had no clue at all, and it was really just that email from Switzerland, which ironically enough, my agent at the time said Mark doesn't work for free, whatever. Unfortunately, I saw the email, and first of all, that's not true at all. I mean, I do stuff for free all the time. If
that's a commercial rep,
yes. Yeah, which I understand, but I was actually surprised by that statement, and so I said, please don't answer for me in these situations. And then I connected directly with the people, and it's been huge. In fact, Nikon asked me to speak about it in Vegas last year, and a blue one shot up 8 feet tall, and so it's really, as you know very well, all this stuff, when you put stuff in, stuff comes out, right?
Yeah. And how long are you with that rep?
Not that long, actually, funny enough.
And the reason why I asked is in I don't have the word, in defense of the rep, like how much does she know who Mark really is from his soul?
That's a good, we never met in person. They're based in England.
Yeah.
That's true, and I love working with reps, but the actual response was a bit curt, I thought.
Yeah, I get that, but yeah,
and so that's the part that I really
like. That would have really been surprised. That your answer would have been surprising if you were together for 5 or 7 years.
That they really know that I do this stuff. That's really well said.
Yeah.
So this here, I'm sticking on this. Does anybody know where this is? Because this really leads to the last part, but it's a good history lesson. I can't see everybody here. Does anybody raise their hand or put in the chat where they think this is?
A free book if they get it right, Mark?
Yes.
All right. You get to pick one book. We're going to do this for 10 seconds. If you put it in and you guess where that is, you get one of Mark's books.
Yeah, that's a great thing. See, you're so good, Frank. That's a great question. I'm looking at the chat.
9, 8.
How do I do chats here? I'll
7,
let you tell me.
6,
Anybody guessing at
5.
all?
No.
Okay.
4, 3, 2, 1. All right, you keep all your books,
Well,
Marco.
see, now it's too late to get a book, but I'll give one hint. This is where photography started. At least if you believe in not the British. Well, I'll just do it straight out. I'll just tell you. So this is where this is Niesp's room where he worked, and then Daguerre assisted him in Salon Sermon in France, and this is where it all started, right in this room. So in 1822, 1823. So this is Niesp, Joseph Niesp on the, or at least a painting of him. It's not actually him, but that's a painting of him on the left of our screen. And through this window is where the first photo that's come down through history was shot. Wow. It looks very different. I was actually disappointed when I went here because the view out the window is very different from what the original shot is. And I think you guys will recognize the shot. But Niesp is really the father of photography, even though Daguerre gets the credit because in 1839 he patented the Daguerreotype, which of course is incredibly important. And remember, back in the 1820s and earlier, Talbot in England, that's why I mentioned England at the same time, was developing the paper negative, which actually was more what we used, for the next 100 and something years, as we move to the negative process rather than the positive of a Daguerreotype or a one-off of the Daguerreotype. But look at this window view, and this is what used to be out there. And I would think some of you guys might remember this shot, not from when it was taken, but from history. So this was an all-day exposure, right? The key is you could see something through a camera, and it might have a latent image on something, but it wouldn't stick. And so finally, they figured out how to make that image stick. But that's Daguerre, who, portrait of him, 1844. And remember how people used to stay extremely still. And we thought, wow, people were so uncomfortable in front of the camera. But it wasn't from necessarily being uncomfortable or afraid of this weird machine, but it's because you had to stay still, for a long period of time. But these are ways to keep people still, with these head clamps, basically. And sometimes they had to be scratched out or whatever. But I just find history.
I've never seen that. That's so interesting.
Isn't that interesting? And so that's why I love to sort of wrap up my presentation with really the history, because that's so much of where I come from in terms of the stories I generate, the history. And so this is Alfred Eisenstadt. So everybody knows the photos that the next people I'm going to show have taken, but they don't necessarily know what the people look like. There's, a few exceptions. People know Ansel Adams, what he looks like. But this was Eisy. And so this was used when he passed away in Life magazine as a full page as the final tribute to him. He said it was his favorite shot. But so my first book in 1998 by Abbeville Press, we excerpted my interviews with 20 photographers, and it opened with my portrait of each of them, and then excerpts from the interviews. And so obviously we know the photo that Eisy did of the sailor kissing the nurse. But to me, his strongest shot is this incredibly powerful environmental portrait of a woman in the rubble of Hiroshima half a year after the end of the war. He traveled with MacArthur down to Hiroshima, and everything I think works in this image. So you guys might recognize some of these people, I would think. This is Helmut Newton in Monaco, and he really woke up fashion photography in the 1960s, right? I mean, here's as he talked about when you read it. I mean, this is a woman's. Abby talked about hair and stuff. This made anybody who's wearing a wig, the wigs blow off, right? In other words, it's just like shocking. Here's a woman with her legs apart staring down a guy. I mean, it's no big deal now, but if you look, in the 60s and 70s, that's pretty intense for a magazine, to run. This is Iraqi, who's produced more books than anybody in history. Every frame he shoots pretty much ends up in a in a book. Edward Buba, he wrote the intro to the French edition of the book. Gordon Parks.
Yeah.
I mean, so many backstories about each of their photos. I won't go into them here, but
no, this is a wonderful addition, Mark. It's a beautiful way to.
Well, I thought to share, since we're all photographers here, or have an interest in it. I think to see the people behind the lens, and this is a series that has meant a lot to me in a lot of levels, and I think that is useful for photographers to see. But Gordon's backstory about how this photo came about all the racism that he encountered in Washington, D.C., which he didn't expect. He understood it when he was in Fort Scott, Kansas. But when he went to Washington, D.C., it was actually Jack Delano at the Farm Security Administration said, put your cameras down and go get something to eat across the street, go to a movie theater, go get a top coat. And in every place, he was confronted by racism. And you have to sit in the balcony, or you can't sit at the counter. And so then Jack said, okay, now go out. And then when he got back, he told Jack about that. And Jack said, okay, now go out and take a photograph that conveys how you feel. And this was the shot. Mm. And then from the strength of that, you talk about one thing leading to another. He got the assignment to photograph Ingrid Bergman and Rossellini on the island of Stromboli. This is sort of hot off the presses. I just pulled this off the contact sheet, and maybe it's too flat now that I'm looking at it. But a magazine wants to do a feature on this body of work. So this is Joseph Karsh, and so Karsh did the famous photo of Winston Churchill looking very stern that you guys might know. You guys would recognize his photo. You guys might recognize Annie Leibovitz, Sebastian Salgado. And these were not often long photo sessions. They were often, really a snapshot. I didn't realize I was going to be doing a book at the time for some of these at all. The main purpose was to do an interview. I wish I could go back and do some. I did a photograph of the gentleman on Ishikawa on the right. I never photographed W. Jane Smith. I never met him. I would have loved to. If I could only point to one photographic hero, W. Jane Smith would be way up at the top of the list. I definitely have others, but this shot is of Ishikawa, shot of W. Jane Smith. He was his assistant in Minamata. And so that's in Minamata, after a long day printing, small prints. And now I wonder if anybody's seen the movie Minamata already with Johnny Depp. I have not seen it yet, but I think I'd love to. This is Jean-Luc Sieff, who refused to be cubbyholed into any genre of photography. He passed away too young. Oh, sorry. I put this together so fast. We got Helmet twice. But this is Philip Jones Griffiths, who did Vietnam Inc., very powerful.
Agent Orange also is one of his books.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I mean, just amazing, so bright and so clear thinking about that he had a job to do. And so in our interviews, we talked about that. How do you shoot something like that? And he goes, how do you shoot a disgusting thing without making it disgusting that people can look at and learn from? And we go into that discussion. Graciela Turbide, Herb Ritz, good friend of mine. We're actually Nick's going to come with me down to the Antarctic. So this is Nick Oot, who did the picture of the little girl hit by napalm. There's actually a documentary out now that I was involved in called From Hell to Hollywood. But that's an environmental portrait of Nick when I first met him back in the 90s, with a photo of Kim Phuc in the background. And this is Kim Phuc now. So this is, this is a few years ago, but basically you could say, present day. And she has permanent scars on her left arm and her back, but she's lived and continues to live a very full life and has an amazing, backstory as well. Just a few more real fast. Because we were talking about
I was just going to say at the end, I'm going to tell Sandro you don't have a shot of him.
Exactly. So I figured I better put Sandro in there. But Sandro is really, please, you guys, if you have a chance, check out all his work. It's Sandro_film, but in particular his series with Malkovich on famous photographers, where Malkovich channels all these famous the key characters in each photograph, and they're just beyond
iconic images. Yeah.
Oh yeah, in fact, you know what? I actually put them in. So this is not Arnold Newman's photo. This is actually Sandro's shot that looks almost exactly like the shot that
Wow. Okay.
that Arnold Newman did. And so that is John Malkovich right there. Is that amazing?
Yeah.
I mean,
I had
just
a-
the precision.
That's
I had the
Malcolm.
pleasure of judging alongside Sandro in Shanghai and Tokyo for the Nikon photo contest, and such a wonderful character.
Well, how long ago was that?
This was about 6 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
We've been in touch, as in we still message each other. But yeah, Sandro is so amazing. When I first met him, I said that I was so captivated by the campaign that he shot for Nikon with the new 14-24 lens, the motorcycle, the motorcycle shot that came so close to the camera, and yeah, so Sandro is such an influence, and so happy to call him a friend now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, definitely send him a note and say, hey, Mark was saying really bad stuff.
I just told him. I just sent them a note. You're all
Oh.
over projections tonight.
Oh, okay. So too late to make fun of him. Okay. But the interesting thing here, so maybe he'll watch this later, and I told Sandra about this too, is this is just such an amazing interpretation, or not, it's not even an interpretation. I mean, he's trying to make it look exactly like that original shot by
Yeah,
Dorothea
and
Lange.
people should know, like, he didn't just superimpose. They created every one of those spaces.
It's beyond belief. It just I mean, anybody knows Sandro, he just the work he puts into these things, and of course his team, and of course John as well. I mean, all of them. It's just
everybody.
unbelievable. And so here's some of the books we talked about, books, and so that's the old North Korea, inside North Korea. So don't get that if anybody's interested. I shouldn't say that, right? I'll get in trouble with Chronicle, but the top left one is the newer one. And then if anybody's interested, my Instagram and my website for workshops or whatever, and follow me if you feel like it. But thank you guys, and Frank, thanks so much for having me on here. Last time we saw each other was pre-COVID in New York.
Oh my God,
and then
that was the other life. It feels like now.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of have adapted to it in a way, but I think we're moving through it pretty well, I think. Can I say that? But thank you.
Yes. No, I think everybody. I mean, 3 great presenters today. You've inspired all of us with all your projects and books and prints and everything that you've accomplished. It's really, this is what makes these evenings so nice, is that you leave more inspired than when you walked in, and you think you've seen everything and you haven't. I mean, it's just really. Mark, you're out of New York?
No. Well, born in New York, and I still probably have some New York in me. I think you grew up with New York parents, you'll always be a New Yorker. But I'm in LA. And now I'm trying to say, I don't know if it's to say cool or if it's really true, but LA, Tokyo. I'm trying to spend more and more time over there now. Beautiful. So obviously it's a little bit tough now because but I had 2 months during the Olympics and stayed on for a while and then came back, and I'll go back in February.
Well, we can open it up. Anyone else has any questions, comments, wants to say hello? But I really appreciate it. That's a great night. Abby, you did great. Stefen, just great. I mean, good story. And I mean, and of course, it's a standing offer to come back and show other bodies of work, with new things from the archive. We're always having people come back and forth. Did you do a book on Iran?
Yeah, I just sent the note back. Yes, that was with Chronicle Books as well. So after North Korea, we did Iran, and so I was there twice.
Wow. When did you do
Oh,
that?
thank you. 2007,
Oh, okay.
and two separate trips. I went first to sort of like the heart of Iran, Isfahan, Shiraz,
Shiraz, yeah.
Tehran, obviously. The second one, I did the whole border regions, because then I really started thinking in terms of a book and what I needed to do to complete it. So I went back and I went to Mashhad,
Mashhad.
up to the Caspian
Up to the-
Sea,
Yeah.
and then all the way to Hamadan, and then all the way down to the Shuttle Arab water. Oh, and I flew to Quiche,
Yeah.
and then went to the
Persian Gulf. Persian
exactly.
Gulf,
Yeah, I went to Khorramshahr.
Khorramshahr, Abadan.
Got a little trouble down there. That was a little dicey. I got interrogated. I got pulled. Well, I don't want to say pulled into an office. They asked me to come in. I didn't get pulled in, but
You're lucky.
yeah, things.
They didn't put in a jail.
No, for sure. My friend Roxanne Sabiri, I don't know if you know her at all, but
Yeah.
she was put in jail
I know.
for several months, and the people that she was in the jail cell are still in there.
I know.
But that said, the as you know, the people in Iran are the most hospitable people on earth.
Yeah.
And I was treated extremely well and graciously. The food was amazing. I went
Delicious.
everywhere. There were a few issues a few times. I mean, we got pulled over coming out of a gas station, and they were checking for ration. It was what are those guards called again? Just
Pastaran?
well, they're wearing just blue jeans and AK-47s and stuff, and they pulled us over, and they were actually checking for gas ration cards and stuff, and so that got a little dicey. And a friend of mine from Denmark was in the car. She didn't have hijab on her,
Hijab, yeah.
or a
Scarf.
scarf.
Yeah, scarf, right.
Yeah, and so I just threw something over her head real fast, which is, but it turned out fine. They asked for my passport. I mean, I wasn't driving. We had a driver and a translator, but everything worked out fine. Just down in Khorramshahr is where it really got dicey, because I had decided that I wanted to go out of the Shuttle Arab waterway to Kuwait to get out instead of going back up to Tehran and flying out. And I think that put up some signals, and so but it worked out.
Yeah.
You must have a great passport, Mark.
Yeah, I've got a few of them, and I've got the extensions in there, and those get filled up, and that's a little bit slower. Though I just 2 weeks ago got back from Saudi Arabia, which I was concerned about doing because of what happened in Turkey, with a journalist there, for sure. And then I'm leaving tomorrow for Mexico, and then we got the Antarctic thing, and so what I did is I actually started during this time. I also started doing something called Naked Hollywood, where I would go to Hollywood Boulevard every day and photograph during the pandemic what it was like with the streets empty, and really documenting, because it was basically it became a homeless village in a way, because all the tourists were gone. And so that, so I never want to sit around and twiddle my thumbs. I can't do that. I would, just jump off a roof. Though fortunately I live on a ground floor, so there's no roof to jump off of.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing. Thank you.
That's a very good thing.
Yeah.
So, everybody, thank you so much. We have Michelle Dunn-Marsh.
Oh, I know Michelle. She's great.
I think she used to work at Chronicle Books. She's going to be on in a couple of weeks, highlighting some of her books. So we're excited about that. And then we have David Kernley coming on in the middle of December. So we have a nice lineup of intriguing folks. But like I said, the standing offer for you guys, anytime you want to come back, we'd love to have you. Just like I said, that's always. And if everyone could subscribe to Projections NYC on YouTube, that would be great. That'd be really helpful as well. And thanks. And we'll see you on the radio.
Thank you, Frank.